All right, I have 6 o'clock, so if you will, at this time, please take your seats and let's get orderly, quiet, back and ready to go with this meeting of the Codes and Zoning Committee. I do appreciate all that are in attendance tonight. Great to see folks coming out and seeing government at work. I will remind you, this is a committee of a subcommittee that recommends to the body, the full body, the local legislative body is what it would be called. So as we're here tonight, what our purpose is to look at an ordinance that's been presented before us. We actually are going to end up looking at 2 versions of an ordinance that are going to be both submitted at this point to the county court next Monday night. So what we're looking at here is at those ordinances, going through the discussion of what these ordinances are and just whether or not we have a recommendation from this body. That is what this body's purpose is, to look through it and whether or not we're going to recommend to the full body with a recommendation. Either way, they're going to the full body, these 2. Now, when I say 2, Mr. Jewell, chairman of the commission, has written some edits and is looking at asking to propose, or he's going to present those as his version of the ordinance that he's written up or edited to the commission as well. We will look at both of those tonight at this case. So just making sure everyone understands the purpose of tonight's meeting. We are looking at the 2 ordinances that have been put forth. One by the Planning Commission that was sent to us, one that's a bit edited off the Planning Commission's, has some similar accordances to it and some edits. That is our purpose here tonight, is to look at these ordinances and determine whether or not we want to give them a favorable recommendation. That's literally all we are purpose with. They will go to the full body. That's where action will be taken. Making sure everyone understands that. So as we get started here tonight, first piece we've got, it does appear that our full body is present in attendance. I noticed myself, Landon Gully. We got Miss Beverly Atwood, Mr. Ken Buckmaster, Miss Leslie Overman, Mr. Steve Whitaker is with us as well. We've got Chairman Jewell, who is on each and every committee based on the rules of our county court rules that have been put into place. And we've got Mr. Sam Edwards, building official, who by office is on this Codes and Zoning Committee. So at this point, we will try to slow down to let some writing there move along. We will move to review of the minutes. Each member, you do have a copy of the minutes, and we have this meeting, this committee has not met in quite a while, actually since August, I believe, of last year. We meet when things come along that need to be looked at, referencing zoning or codes. If you will, review those minutes, please. I would entertain a motion that when it's time to accept the minutes or approve the minutes. I will remind you to please, tonight as you talk, please speak into the microphone.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Mr. Whitaker is making a motion to accept.
Second.
I have a second by Ms. Beverly Atwood. All those in favor of the motion as stated, which is approving the minutes as written, please state aye. Aye. Motion is approved. The next piece of business is we come to the point here in this Codes and Zoning Committee meeting where when we don't have any items up for each year in October, when or September, when the committees are reassigned, we have the need now to elect officers. We have not had anything come before us. We don't want to set a meeting just to elect officers. So therefore tonight we will elect officers first. Currently myself has been sitting as chair. Mr. Coy Dickey, who left and was replaced by Miss Leslie Overman, was co-chair or vice chair to this, and our secretary was Mr. John Oliver. So we're going to have to do some rewriting of some of those pieces here in this case. I will open the floor then to nominations. First off for chair. Mr. Whitaker.
Motion to nominate you back as our chair.
Mr. Whitaker, if I understood that you had made a motion to nominate myself back as chair, is that correct? Thank you, sir. I had a second, it looked like, I think, here from Miss Leslie Overman. I appreciate that. So as we go for any other nominations for chair, any other nominations for chair, we will take these as individual pieces. Any other nominations for chair?
Motion nomination cease, elect by acclamation.
Thank you, sir. Motion that been made that nominations cease and be elected by acclamation. All those in favor, please state aye. Any opposed with nay? Motion approved. Next up on that would be vice chair. As I said, there is no current vice chair. Mr. Coy Dickey was that individual, and he has had to leave the body of local legislative body. Any nominations for vice chair? Don't all speak at once. Mr. Jewell,
I will nominate Leslie Overman.
I have a nomination for Miss Leslie Overman.
I'll second that.
We have that nomination seconded. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations?
Motion nomination cease, elect by acclamation.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion that nomination cease and Miss Leslie Overman be elected to vice chair of the Codes and Zoning Committee meeting by acclamation. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with a nay? Motion approved. Lastly, here is secretary. And I do want to say this, I greatly appreciate, I've done that job in a few committees. It is a very important task. The minutes are what I go back to look to and what I hope our those in the legislative body with us go back to look at for our records. So it's a very important task, not one to be taken lightly. Any nominations for secretary?
Beverly.
Miss Beverly Atwood has been nominated. Do I hear a second to that nomination?
Second.
That nomination has been seconded. Thank you. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Mr. Buckmaster?
Motion nomination cease, elect by acclamation.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion that a nomination cease and Ms. Beverly Atwood be elected to Secretary of the Codes and Zoning Committee by acclamation. All those in favor, please let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with a nay? Motion approved. All right, we will move on into business at this time. I want to state this, as you might see our agenda. As I stated earlier, we are here tonight to look at the ordinances we have before us. The first ordinance we got in front of us was, I actually personally, and I'll make this stated publicly, I called every member of this committee to ask them to diligently read through this ordinance so that they have an understanding of what it is. I want you to, we didn't have any discussion on them, but I want to say that I made that phone call that I wanted each member to have truly read through this and be ready to look at the pieces. It has quite a bit of information in it. It comes to us from the Planning Commission. And we will look at that ordinance that we've been presented with us here first. We can take that choice. I do want to state this as well. In our agenda for tonight, we have an area for public comment. That public comment, and you're more than welcome to speak if you wish to sign up and speak right over here. We have an area for that, and we can give that if that is need be here in a few at the end of this conversation. Public comment, we will keep orderly. If we have multiple people, you're more than welcome to speak. That is certainly fine at this piece. We're not going to limit your voice in that conversation of things. We will limit it to amount of time. We'll determine that time as we see how many individuals might sign up at that case. So that's when we will make that determination of time, when we see if there are those that wish to speak. That public comment is item 6. We're on item 5 now of our agenda for those that might have or might not have seen it. Item 5, we are discussing the ordinance that's been put before us. As you see and have this ordinance, one thing I want us to make sure we understand is tonight's discussion of this ordinance. This ordinance is going, as I stated, to the full body as it is written. We're not looking at making changes to this ordinance. We can't make changes. This was sent to us by the Planning Commission and will be sent to the full body. Our job and task here tonight is to take a look through this piece and see if we are in favor, a favorable recognition of this ordinance. If that wants to be made, we'll take that by form of a motion. If someone wants to make a motion to send this on to the full body favorably as written, then we can take that in the form of a motion and vote on that piece. That is the choice here of the body. I am fine tonight if we want to as a body. I would ask the body to, do we want to go through this page by page, piece by piece? It is certainly fine with me how we move through this. Any recommendations from any of those in here? Mayor Chambers, how would you wish to see us proceed going through this ordinance?
I have no preference as to how you do it. I will ask that we try to respect the 7 o'clock hour because we have a special meeting of the Planning Commission called for addressing our multimodal access grant and the sidewalk along Broadway.
Thank you,
But
sir.
other than that, I have no preference how you do it. It's the will of the body.
Understood.
Chairman.
Mr.
I've actually had plenty of time to review the one that we were given don't know, a month or so ago. I would like to hear, Mr. Jules, Chairman Jules' reasoning for his version of it, however.
So, Mr. Buckmaster, we would like to hear Mr. Jewell's reasoning for making some changes and submitting a different ordinance in this case, which I said both are going to be submitted at this point. The information we have is both of these are going to be presented. Mr. Jewell gave us that in an email that both will be presented to the full body next Monday night. Mr. Jewell, I will give you the floor at this time to kind of answer that question of Mr. Buckmaster.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. When this was first sent over to me and I looked at it, I had a lot of questions about it. And that was why I referred it to the committee for the committee to look at and study it. After talking with members of the Planning Commission and going back through the minutes from the Planning Commission, the secretary was gracious enough to send me some additional information, and I certainly appreciate her being able to do that. I think I do not believe and don't want anyone to believe that the Planning Commission, in my opinion, has done anything wrong or inappropriate, or Mr. Edwards in his office. I do believe that we may have received some bad advice from GNRC possibly. I do not sit on the Planning Commission, but I was a part of the Planning Commission for many years in the role as building inspector and previous to that. So there were several things that troubled me about this. Number one, what is allowed in an A1 zone is specifically enumerated in the code. And then the article at the very end of it that says things that are prohibited, and I don't want to speak, so I'm going to look at my notes here. Wrong. Then I know you don't have those in front of you, but I need to at least lay out how this developed. We do have in section 4120 developmental standards for mining activities and related services. It does not specifically call out a zone. That is correct. If you go to our zoning districts and the purpose of the various zones, and you look at what is specified, the purpose of the agricultural zone, agricultural forestry related product, it enumerates several permitted uses, many permitted uses actually. And then at the very end, it says uses prohibited. And it says in the A1 agricultural forestry district, all uses except those uses or the accessory uses specifically permitted or permitted on approval as a special exception by the board are strictly prohibited. My interpretation, my reading of that, and long-standing interpretation by our previous planning commissions, if it doesn't say you can put it there, you can't put it there. So that was the thing that jumped out at me immediately. Do I feel that we need to strengthen our ordinances as far as what the developmental standards are? Absolutely. Do we maybe need to clarify a bit more where it is or isn't allowed? Absolutely. And that's what we're attempting to do here tonight with both of these resolutions, I might say. If you look at the M2 classification, which is our industrial district, at item 6, under permitted uses, uses permitted, it says stone. I'm going to repeat that, stone, clay, and glass products manufacturing. My only question would be, how do you manufacture stone if it's not a quarry or a crusher or something to that effect? So it is my interpretation, and has been in the years that I've dealt with this, that our zoning regulations do address this. Maybe not to the extent that they need to or that they should, but I think the proposal to allow this in an A1 and a heavy industrial or medium industrial are as incompatible in 2 zones, and there are 10 of those 2 zones, as you could possibly have. So therefore, I attempted to take what had been sent over from planning, and I believe it was authored by GNRC. I don't know that. I assume that it was, and go through it. And basically, if you look at what I have proposed, or what I gave you, or my version of it. The things that was changed is leaving it out of A1, keeping it in the M2 zone as a special exception, adding the definitions. The only thing that I changed from their version was the word quarry. Was not in their version. I thought it needed to be, since that seems to be the main thing that we're having to deal with. Adding it to section 5.046, M2 Intermediate Impact Industrial District as a special exception, which would denote a review and approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals. In the developmental standards, I deleted in 4.120, their version, the reference to A1 and left it strictly M2. On page 5 of it, the separation distance, I didn't think 1 mile was enough separation distance between quarries, and I increased that to 10 mile. We can certainly talk about that if we feel like that's excessive. It certainly does not forbid it from being multiple places in your county by that verbiage. If you have 2 10 miles apart, somebody's going to be 5 miles from each one of them. So that wouldn't precipitate a 5 mile. Left the property line setbacks, off-site structure, all that verbiage is the same. On section K, says operation, I believe it said shall minimum disturbances. I added the word have. That's just a grammatical oversight, I believe. And then on the very last item P, section P, I added in, because it said collection of water and excavation. It should say in and excavation. And added a sentence that said such fenced area shall have adequate signage provided as to danger of entry and maintained continuously while there is a danger presented upon entry. That's really the only changes, other than taking it out of the A1 as an allowed use, which encompasses 80% of your county. And I think you certainly don't want to see the county pockmarked with quarries. I'm not saying that would happen one way or the other, but that would be my fear in the other district. You're talking about allowing this as a specific allowed use when there's no other allowed industrial use in the A1 zone. Just seemed a bit incongruent with the purposes of our zoning and the way that we have interpreted our zoning all of these years. That's my purpose. That's my reasoning. I don't think should be allowed in an A1 zone. Certainly, if there's property that's suitable and it is zoned A1, petitioner can request it being rezoned to M2. And if that site seemed to meet the requirements, I feel confident that it would be rezoned if it looked like it was a good place and a good location. So this is in no way an effort to zone out a quarry. I think we've already zoned out a quarry in an agricultural zone. I think it should be and is now allowed in an M2. This would only strengthen that language. So that is where I'm at. I want everybody to know I am not against having a rock quarry in our county. I see many advantages to having it. I just think we need to have a little bit more control over the developmental standards and where it is located. And that is what my proposal is attempting to do, and that's all it's attempting to do. Did that explain it well enough for everyone? And certainly if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If any of the members of the Planning Commission or of our here want to talk to me about it, I'd love to. I've not reached out to them. I've not tried to reach out to anybody and influence their thinking on this one way or the other. I did send this to everyone, this proposal today. I was waiting to hear from county attorney as to whether that would be appropriate to send it out and not just drop it in everyone's lap tonight. And that's why you're a little late getting it today. But it's something that's been in the works for quite some time. Just didn't want to jade the process by having conversations that maybe could be misconstrued.
Thank you, sir. I think by a head shake there, it appeared that Mr. Buckmaster was said you answered his question as he had asked it. So we see some things here that we have before us. I have myself one question, and I see the chair of the Planning Commission is here as well. Mr. Kerr, if you would you, I have a question that I'd like to ask you myself.
Yes,
So
Mr. Chairman.
thank you, sir. As I'm looking at it, I hear the word spot zoning come up. And what do we know at this time is the definition of the word spot zoning?
Spot zoning typically means where you try to put something in a zone and nothing else around it is compatible with that zone. Like if you're trying to do an R1 district in a agricultural zone and there's nothing but agricultural around it, it could be considered spot zoning. That's just an example of how that could work.
So when that determination is made, who makes that determination of this is spot zoning?
Well, the Planning Commission would discuss that. Sam and our representative from GNRC have never been shy about speaking up about the possibility of that. And it's debated and talked about. And ultimately, what we would do, and the only thing we can do, is send it to the county commission because that's the only body that can rezone property. And so the strongest language we could do is either to send it on with a favorable recommendation or to send it on with an unfavorable recommendation or no recommendation at all.
Very similar to what we're looking at with this ordinance here in this committee tonight. I asked that question because as I sit here last Monday night in the Planning Commission, I heard a word about spot zoning that I'd never heard, or a phrase. Our lady from GNRC, and I don't know her name, she's new. I apologize.
Last meeting was her very first meeting with us.
Understood. Well, she made a comment about a piece that you were looking at rezoning there that spoke that this is larger than 5 acres, so it would not be considered spot zoning.
Right.
That's the reason I asked that question of where. I want us to all get a true understanding of where spot zoning and what that looks like. I'm not sure. I've asked that question to some others, and I've not got an opinion back yet of, is that the case? It's spot zoning as long as it's larger than 5 acres.
Well, maybe I can shed a little more light on that.
Thank you.
You know, when you have a county like ours that's primarily A1 and someone brings in a development, and typically in our case, it's some sort of housing development as to what we've been dealing with the last several years. A1 zoning is really the only zone that would typically have the acreage for a pretty good size development. So if you're up around 5 acres or so, then that's a big enough one that, you know, you got to start somewhere or you'd never progress outside your city limits. And so, I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule that it's 5 acres. It depends upon the development, what all is going in it and everything. But it's really just a basic starting point where we would then recommend to the county commission why we gave it a favorable rating or an unfavorable rating. Does that help any?
It was very much, and I appreciate it, sir. I think that's answered exactly what I wanted you to answer. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
As we look at.
If I can say something about tonight's,
In
unless you're gonna let me speak later.
terms of,
I just want to give an overview from the Planning Commission's point of view.
we may have that a piece here in just a minute then.
That's fine.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So my reasoning for that question, I want to get this piece to us as well. What Mr. Jewell has presented to us here, Commissioner Jewell, or Chairman Jewell has presented, looks at moving the A1 out of it entirely. And I wanted to make sure we all understand that that M2 piece would not necessarily be considered spot zoning if that was the case, and it would be an available piece based on some of the thoughts here. I'm not saying that's completely my opinion at this point. I'm hearing the pieces and I want us to make sure that we understand it. In other words, if we went to, if this body recommends favorably one or the other, and the commission votes on either one of them favorably, whichever one becomes an ordinance as we go forward. M2, if it's only that and one is stricken, the A1 part is stricken from the writing, that it would not be preventing someone. That's the question I'm trying to drive at here in this case. So the reasoning behind the pieces. Any questions there in this case? Chairman Jewell there, as he's looked at us here in this case and has gone through those, his reasoning for this piece. As I said, our job here tonight is to look at what we've got before us. We really have two ordinances. One, we can adapt, we can change. Mr. Jewell's could be changed at this point. The one coming to us from from the Planning Commission, it's set. It's whether or not we want to send that with a favorable or no recommendation at all, very much as you've just explained, of their choice in a zoning recommendation. So at this point, it seems quiet amongst us, which is not always a bad thing.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Whitaker.
I have a question. What is the expected yearly revenue that Travis County should get should a rock quarry come in?
Mr. Whitaker, at this point, that question doesn't pertain to what we've got available to us tonight. We're not here tonight to discuss the rock quarry that's been proposed in no way, form, or fashion. I apologize for leading you in that case. Our job tonight is to look at the two ordinances that we have before us. That discussion would be for next Monday night, or later on at that point. At this point, our job, and I want us to keep tight to our job here tonight. Our job tonight is to look at what's before us. We've got two ordinances that have been put in now, and I do know that Mr. Jewell has stated to you, I received mine about 3:30 today. That's when I started going through this piece. I think he emailed it. Did you email that to all, Mr. Jewell?
I emailed it to everyone on the committee.
Thank you, sir. I didn't
And
look.
to the mayor, and Mr. Beller was copied on it, and the two commissioners from that district. I don't remember anyone else being included in it.
Thank you, sir.
I would like, might I speak to the spot zoning question just briefly?
If you would like to, yes, sir.
Anything that we have jurisdiction on is 5 acres and under. Anything 5 acres and over, state law dictates what is, what isn't, other than the zone itself. If it's a 5 acre subdivision of property, it never goes before the Planning Commission. They never lay eyes on it. If it's a platted subdivision with multiple lots, of course it would if it's more than that. But say you had a simple subdivision of a farm and you want to cut an acre off for your son. Those type issues are that, and plat reviews for subdivision, major subdivisions, what goes to planning. Typically a subdivision or resale or use in a zone, what the zone says about it is what dictates that.
Thank you, sir. And as I stated earlier, the only reason for this discussion on that part of spot zoning in this conversation is so that we understand what we're looking at as an ordinance that needs to go in. Our ordinance would tell the Planning Commission how they should act. It gives them that direction that they need to go upon. That's why we're looking at an ordinance that needs to be put in place. Some have the opinion that we already have a blockage from A1. Some have different opinions on that. That's left to be determined by a lawyer, honestly, at this point, in my opinion. And I'm definitely not going to claim to be one of those. I can promise you that. But as we go forward here, I only state that because we may have those that do or don't want a rock quarry here tonight. And I understand that. That's not what we're here to discuss. What we are here to discuss is the fact that we cannot prevent, completely exclude something from our ordinances. We can't just say, hey, we don't want any rock quarries in Travis County, so we're just going to exclude it from all of our ordinance pieces. That's not allowable. That's why we're here tonight, to look at these pieces and make a recommendation of whether we like or don't like favorably these ordinances to the full body. Mr. Buckmaster.
Chairman Goliad, because of your explanation right there, we are here to make a decision on one of these two. Personally, I'd like to recommend to the full body that we accept Mr. Jewell's version, which removes A1 from all mining and quarrying activities. I'd also like to state that there needs to be a discussion quickly on the rules within the M2 zoning. After reviewing those today, we probably need to look those over very quickly as well.
You put that in the form of a motion, is that correct? Your motion, as stated, if I heard that correctly, was to, as this body, to recommend favorably Chairman Jewell's ordinance he has put forth, which removes A1 from the original ordinance that the Planning Commission has put forth. I want to make sure we all note that does not mean that that ordinance that the Planning Commission put forth would not go to the full body. Both will go to the full body. Just make sure that this body is a recommending body with all we have the option of doing is favorable or unfavorable. No different than Planning Commission sends to us a zoning with a favorable or unfavorable recommendation of, or none at all. Sometimes they send it with no vote whatsoever. I would entertain, we have a motion made to that effect. Do we have a second to that motion?
Yes.
I do see seconds to that motion. At this point, we are voting, as I said, your vote of yes would be in favor of the motion which was stated to recommend to the full body the ordinance from this body that Chairman Jewell has placed, which excludes A1 from the piece. I hope and am sure that everyone has read carefully these pieces. Okay, I want you to make sure that you've read through these, you know what you got in front of you. So if you vote right now tonight, you're voting your conscience on that piece of understanding. At this point, as I stated, this has nothing to do with voting yes or no towards a rock quarry. This has all to do with voting on an ordinance of support for an ordinance to the full body, local legislative body, as it's called. All those in favor, I will ask that you raise, oh, I apologize. Are there any, thank you, sir. Almost got ahead of myself there. Are there any discussion to be had on this motion? Mr. Edwards?
I'm not 100% confident on voting on this particular ordinance, getting it so late in the day. I haven't reviewed it to the thoroughness that it needs to be. I'm very confident that it probably matches closely to what's there, but because I haven't thoroughly reviewed it, I'm not going to be voting favorably on it. There were some things that were brought up by Mr. Jewell that are concerning, and I am here for questions and I've got answers for them in regards to the portion that's in the agriculture zoning that was talking about special exceptions being prohibited. That's been thoroughly checked in, due diligence was done. I've verified with multiple planning departments in other counties to reference this section, read our ordinance, and do their interpretation without any influence on it, and I've gotten their determinations back on that. The fact that we haven't given any zoning to mining, period, in mine, GNRCs, and the other planning departments, this section does not prohibit it. They said that you have to assign it a zoning, and that's fine. That's what we're doing tonight. We're trying to assign a zoning to this mine, and that's great. This mining ordinance has to have something. There was a statement made about the section that is in M2 zoning, the stone, glass, and clay manufacturing. Now, if you read that backwards, and this has been thoroughly reviewed as well, if you read that backwards, you're manufacturing products out of stone, glass, and clay. Manufacturing those products. Has anybody ever bought stoneware, bought glasses? That's the interpretation of that, in my opinion, and I've asked others to weigh in on that decision. But it's manufacturing products out of stone, glass, and clay. It's not quarrying, it's manufacturing. If you look into the ordinance that was presented by the Planning Commission, the A1 portion and the M2 portion that was submitted, if you look under uses permitted as special exceptions, that's a special exception. There's a reason why that special exception is in there. When you put special exception in there, it requires you to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So any application for any property around the county would be required to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, whether it's A1 or M2 already. This was looked at from many angles for 3 months plus on legalities, what's the best practices. GNRC took the ordinances of every single county surrounding us and referenced them, called them, asked them best practices. What mistakes have you made? What's wishes you should have done that you didn't do and that you're now looking at? And they created this ordinance for us. But to go back to that special exception, there's a point that that's in there. If they find a property that is actually usable and it is already A1 and it is usable, and they take it to the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask for permission to do a quarry on that usable property, the Board of Zoning Appeals has different authorities than the Planning Commission. The Board of Zoning Appeals can look at it and they don't have to follow the set guidelines that we have here like the Planning Commission does. Planning Commission is just going to look at it and say, yes, you meet all these criteria, you're allowed to go there. The Board of Zoning Appeals will look at it objectively, talk to the neighbors, talk to the area, look at the streets that it's going on. They can make a lot of decisions based on what they think. So that's the reason why it's in there. The Board of Zoning Appeals would be a stopgap for anything unless it's perfect. It would have to be perfect for it to arrive in an A1 zoning. That's the whole point that that's in there. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out and addressed the two things that were listed. I was hoping somebody would ask me on them, but there it is. If there's any other questions in regards to what was submitted from the Planning Commission, I'd be more than happy to explain anything that you have.
You yourself, Mr. Edwards or Mr. Kerr, I'll address this your way, either one. In looking at the two, one huge difference I see, other than the A1 difference that we've somewhat had explained, is 1 mile and 10 mile, which is item E, separation between quarries. The one that Mr. Jewell has presented has a 10-mile separation recommendation versus the one that was submitted by the Planning Commission has a 1 mile separation. Either of you want, or both would, if you wish to speak on that, you're more than welcome to.
Is that a question?
That is a question.
Okay, so I'm okay with a motion to increase that. That's fine. That's what we're here today, is to determine if it's acceptable or if there's something that you would like to change, it can be changed. That's fine. But if you look at our county as a whole, we have several peninsulas. So are we talking, how are we talking about this? 10 miles as the crow flies? Because it could put us on the other side of the county. And I mean, depending on where it's located, you could be pushing it out of the county in every direction. So it really depends with that 10-mile mark. I'd have to do measurements on Mr. Jules. And like I said, I haven't been able to thoroughly review his yet. The 1 mile was suggested based on the, there was actually not much conversation, to be honest with you, on the 1 mile distancing. That was brought forward based on everybody else, all the other counties surrounding us, their intact ordinance that they've been operating for years. So that is the way the other counties have it set. So, but there was no real discussion on the distancing.
If I might,
Mr. Jewell, just a second. First, one statement on that. So in either ordinance, I don't read either ordinance as stating whether that's by the crow flies or is that a 1 mile radius or is that 1 mile of road. Either ordinance, neither of the ordinances to me give us that understanding. So that leaves a lot of open interpretation, I'm afraid of. Mr. Kerr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what this committee needs to understand is the Planning Commission wanted to give the county commission options. It's not like the county commission said, we need to put this in A1, we need to put this in. The county commission needs options so that they can be discussed. So they've got legal help that can bring them expertise in that area. And that type of thing. 1 mile, 10 miles. Sam actually said it best. We just need clear and concise regulations that meet the law that we go by. And that's all we're asking for. We don't set them. That's y'all's job. And we know that y'all will do your best with it. And we support you on that. And you know, it's not like anybody on the planning commission said, we need this. It never happened, you know, and so but the chairman said it best. We've got to be able to manage it. I said that in public hearing in our meetings for 3 months in a row, that if we don't get this where we can manage it, then exactly what has wound up happening was going to happen. I hate to be prophetic, but it did. And that's all I wanted to say before is we just want y'all to take advantage of all your expertise and give us clear and concise rules to go by, and we'll follow them.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Jewell?
I wanted to explain my reasoning for changing it to 10 miles. At 1 mile, you're coming up 231 from the river bridge. You have one at mile 1, mile 2, mile 3, mile 4. You could potentially have 6 quarry sites between Highway 25 and the 231 bridge. 10 mile does not limit it to just one location. If you have one 10 miles down the road, somebody in between is only 5 miles away. So 10 mile may sound excessive, but I think somebody that was smack in between 2 at 5. Now, that was my reasoning. I thought it needed to be more than a mile. Certainly, if the body Monday night decides that 10 miles is excessive, it needs to be 6 miles, 5 miles, 4 miles. I'm amenable to that. That was the reason for that change. I did not feel like the way it was written, as it was allowed in an A1 zone, you could literally have a pockmark all over your county every mile on every road. And that was what I was trying to accomplish with that. From the proposed site, you would have a large area that you would be able to have a second quarry. You would have, if you put one in the upper northwest corner of the county, you would still have the whole northeast section of the county. So it's no way prohibiting it from being in other sites. But that was my process. That was my thinking. That's why that is there. And I am certainly not that adamant on that point as much as I am. It should not be in an A1 zone.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments at this time? With that said, myself, as I look at this piece, I think Mr. Edwards said something well just a few minutes ago in the terms of time to look at. I know sometimes we want to get things accomplished now, and that's when we end up looking back. And, as I go look at the timeline that I've been presented, there was a time while we're in this situation from well back in 2003 when mining was removed. That's why we sit here today. Sometimes it's important that we look thoroughly at what we're fixing to put into place. It's always important at that, not sometimes, always important. Or what we remove. It's very important going forward. That's why it's important that as a body, the legislative body, we pay close attention and know what we're talking about and what we're voting on each time. Please, I myself am one inclined to, I see some things in both I'd like to see a little difference in. Don't hear me wrong. One, I need us to know the planning commission that was presented is going to the full body as it's written. Full. That's going to the full body Monday night. As Mr. Kerr said, they're open to us making some changes and putting something different to them that we end up passing. He's just asking, not for himself, but for the commission, for them to have a rule, an order, a way to go. And that's what we're looked at moving here tonight. So let's be careful that as we look through this, that we really, truly take that time to consider all pieces of it where we don't get hit with something else later on that we missed. Any other thoughts of anybody? We do have a motion and a second on the floor to recommend the ordinance that was presented by Chairman Jewell tonight to the full body with a favorable recommendation. Both are going. This is only voting to state that you are recommending with your approval the ordinance that Chairman Jewell has presented. Is everybody clear on what you're voting on at this time? All right, with that said, I think it best here in this case that we will first take this by voice vote, and we'll see if that leads us to need to go a different route. We will move from there. All those in favor of recommending the proposed ordinance by Chairman Jewell to the full body with a favorable recommendation, please let it be known by stating aye. Aye. Those against with a nay, nay. I think I heard enough yays, it sounded to me as in this case. Let's do that just carefully by a hand vote to be sure of that. I want to make sure we send this as it is. All those in favor of the zoning ordinance that Chairman Jewell has presented being sent to the full body with a favorable recommendation, please let that be known by raising your hand. I see 4 votes at this case. All those against with a hand at this time? That is 3 with a nay. I will state my nay is not that I don't like the ordinance. I think there's a few things in this ordinance I would like to see changed at this point. I think it's got some strong potential to the piece. I don't have to state my reason for voting no, but I will state my reason for voting no at this time. All right, at that time, we do have at this time and I do apologize on our agenda. We had other business set in there for us on this piece. That was a mistake and a typo on our agenda. We do not have any other business tonight to discuss other than the ordinances in front of us. So with that said, as I stated, if I do have those that wish to talk and speak, you're more than welcome to come to the podium here. I would ask that you come and sign up. That way I can know how many are coming to sign up to speak. And if you are wanting to speak, remember, we are speaking tonight, not towards opposition for or against the COI. We are speaking on terms of this ordinance here tonight. I'm not trying to limit you in any way. That is, you're welcome to say your opinion and say what you want to do. That's up to you. I'm just stating this body's job tonight is about these ordinances. That's all we're here for. You're welcome to voice your opinion how you wish. It's public comment. So if anybody at this time does wish to speak, you're welcome to come to the podium and sign up. We'll see how many people are going to speak. Any others that want to sign up? It appears at this time we have 4 individuals. I will call these in the order they have been signed. I will ask you that we will limit you, and I'm gonna put it on a timer at 2 minutes. At 2 minutes, at this case for time to speak to what you wish. It is public comment. It is open what you wish to speak on. Give me just a second. I'll get a clock going here. You go. All right, Mr. Casey Coon.
My name is Dr. Casey Coon. All right, so the quarry's got all these experts with the initials in front of their name, back of their name, whatever. I've got those same initials. I'm against it. I'm not getting paid to vote for it. I'll limit a lot of the stuff since it's just focused on the zoning in the spirit of honesty and transparency. And like Mr. Edwards said, time to review. How about the neighbors that butt up next to the property that were not afforded the time to review? My neighbors directly next door to me, whose house is 60 feet from the property line. We've witnessed the drilling going on since October. Nobody told us what was going on. For 3 weeks, there was a sign out on 231 that said house occupation requests. Why, a week before the planning meeting, was there tape over it that said quarry request? We're in the spirit of honesty and transparency, right? That's all I've got.
Thank you, Dr. Coon. Next up, I have Michelle Wright. Ms. Wright, 2 minutes.
Good evening. I applaud your efforts of trying to do right by the county with comprehensive growth planning, or at least what you're attempting to do with changing the ordinances. One thing I'll point out. Okay. One thing that I will point out is I am in the engineering business, so we do a lot of code interpretation when there's not good code recommendations I set forth. one of the things that we do is look at historical code ordinances to see what's implied. In the absence of something that's there, some of the history tells us what to look for. A lot of times when there are challenges to zoning, the rationale behind it is to make sure it's promoting the better good of the community, but also that whatever you're talking about doing most directly aligns with what the current zoning is for that area. So the recommendation of M2, in my opinion, is very appropriate in that it speaks to, and if you read it specifically, it is stating, hold on, let me find my notes here real quick. It basically says M2 is for industry that provides noise, air pollution, different things like that, which is directly in alignment with what a rock quarry would cause. So I think M2 is appropriate. I think A1 is so separate from that marks it as not appropriate. So now what happens is you look backwards to the history for what you have, because this new ordinance isn't going to affect the quarry because it's a new ordinance. But going forward, you need to look at comprehensive planning. You need to understand what you want this county to look like. You need to consult with economic development and community consulting organizations that can help you determine what you want to do for your zoning, and that will prevent the spot zoning. Spot zoning happens when you don't have a comprehensive plan and when you begin to take A1 to an M2 just like that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. I apologize. It says Joe here, but I cannot read that last name. Okay, Catchmark. Joe, will you state your name when you get up there?
My name's Joe Catchmark. I just want to know if they do put this rock quarry in, have anybody been on 231 south of Interstate 40? There's a rock quarry out there and the road looks terrible. I mean, it looks like a mud field out there. Is there going to be any safeguards that that's not going to happen if they put one in this county? That's all I got.
Thank you, sir. I have one more signed in. I think this is Miss Jenny Lynn Sprague. Is that correct?
It's close enough.
Thank you.
I am new to this community by 7 years. I'm not new to the South or to Tennessee, but I live across the river to the east on the end of Beasley's Bend Road. My two concerns with any zoning related to a quarry would be natural wildlife in the area and what this kind of zoning would influence, and sound. I know from an experience last summer where we had a neighbor blowing tannerite, exactly how the sound carries on that stretch of the river. So if you look at the riverbank on the side of Beasley's Bend, north of the Broken Bridge Park, there's a high bank. Anything coming from Kelly's Berry Farm hits that wall, goes north up the river, hits the giant cliff that's on the north side, and it echoes into the Highway 25 neighborhood area, and it echoes across into the area on, I'm trying to figure out on the map, that next bend of the river where the bridge crosses into Hartsville. If you were to go down into that area, I had people on Facebook last year going, what blew up? What happened? I had elderly neighbors who had their kitchen counters, their cabinets open, and contents dumped on the floor. And that was just from a 4-day weekend of blowing tannerite. And it was echoing, it would go like a blast up the river, it would hit the rock wall, and it would come right back. And we were dealing with it up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And those were my two concerns.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, at this time, we have no others signed in to speak, and I do appreciate the public's coming out. This is how county government works. It's what you need to see in those pieces. So I appreciate that part. Like I said, the ordinance that has been presented tonight and been voted upon to send with a favorable recommendation to the county body will be voted on as a legislative body. This is in no means putting this in as our codes. It goes to the legislative body, and that's where that will be voted upon to put into means. This goes with a favorable recommendation of 4-3, if I counted that correctly. So at this time, we have no other pieces on our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion to adjourn. Is that second? Have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Overman, seconded by Mr. Ken Buckmaster. All those in favor, let it know and be stating aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time tonight.